I'm about to say is probably going to trigger you a lot. And by that I mean it would have triggered me a lot about 5 or 10 years ago. So that's probably why I feel it really needs to be shared. You are not suicidal. Before I go on to share a little bit more, I want to reassure you that I'm not here to invalidate your experience. It doesn't work to be told, have you tried being happy? Have you tried not worrying about it when it comes to depression and anxiety? And it's certainly not helpful for me to invalidate what you're feeling. What you're feeling right now is very real. And at the same time, I feel a sense of responsibility and a calling on my heart to share this message. And before I do, I just want to share a little bit about my journey so you know that I'm not just here to tell you not to feel what you're feeling. My name is Katie. I spent most of my life suicidal, which feels really dramatic to say, but it's true. I'm 33 years old and I spent 20 years of my life suicidal. I first attempted suicide when I was 7 years old, and to this day I still have a very clear memory of what it felt like to have that thought and to act on that thought, that I just wanted to end my life. I began self-harming shortly after that, and that would also continue for many, many years. And I would come to that place many times of this desire to end my life, and more often than not taking some form of action to do so. And this continued for 20 years until around the age of 27, when I attempted suicide for what I knew would be the last time. Now, at that point, my knowing of it being the last time was more on the morbid side of things, where I was convinced that this would really be the time that I died. Now, up to this point, having battled suicide for so long, I had come to some form of acceptance that this is how I would die, that everyone's going to die at some point, and for me, I would die by my own hand. In a way, that was quite a turning point for me to deal with this presence of suicide in my life, because I couldn't fight it anymore, which is pretty scary. So I had become very identified with this, with the identity of being suicidal. It was my way of making sense of why I had this pattern in my life. And when it came to the last time, which was May 2020, over 5 years ago now, and I'm really amazed to be able to say that I haven't even come close to that place in over 5 years, which is honestly a miracle, considering this was like a day in, day out thing for so long. If I had heard at that point somebody tell me, you're not suicidal, that would have been extremely triggering. And so my message doesn't end there. There's a lot more that I want to share. When I had this last suicide attempt, I basically had a near-death experience, which I survived, and this isn't the path that I would recommend to anyone who's dealing with suicide, right? Please, for the love of God, do not attempt to take your life, but at the same time, this is my journey, this is the path that I chose to walk in this life, I believe, so that I could come here and share this message. And maybe it would be true for someone else. That's all I can hope. I just ask that if you are in that place, that you just watch until the end of this video. And you don't have to do anything but just listen to this message. I'm not trying to force you to believe anything. I'm just sharing what has landed as a deeper truth for me. When I survived that near-death experience, it was as if my eyes had been opened for the first time to what life truly is. And up until that point, I had really been a spiritual seeker for many years. I had had various huge revelations and realizations around the true nature of reality and, seeing past the illusion of many things. But the simplest and most profound and literally life-saving truth that landed for me was that life is a gift. And I know this can feel very hard to believe when what you're shown about life is that it's just suffering and pain and separation and division. The wounding of that is so deep. I would invite you to consider the possibility that when you have this feeling of being suicidal, just to explore, what is that actually telling you? What is it actually saying? If the word suicide didn't exist, what are the other words that you could put this feeling into? If you were to describe this to somebody who didn't know the word suicide, what would you say? And I go back to that first time when I was 7 years old, and that memory is still clear now. And if I didn't know the word suicidal, and she didn't at that point, what she actually said was, I want this to end. That in itself is profound. And there may be many things that you want to end, but if you sit with that statement, I want this to end, get curious about what this is. This is the world that you know. This is the life that you know. But you don't know what you don't know. When we can own the fact that it's not necessarily that we want to end life, we just want to end life as we know it. And there's something so profound in that. And fine, that may bring up these other feelings of hopelessness and how do I change my life? All of that, that's not relevant right now. What's relevant right now is that you add those few words. I want to end my life as I know it. So then this opens the door for curiosity. What could life be? What do I want life to be? And the thing is, the way you feel, maybe other people who don't get it would say that it's irrational or dramatic. But the feeling of wanting to end your life comes from this very, very deep place that recognizes the insanity of how we live. We've grown accustomed to believe that suffering is just part and parcel of the human experience. And in one version of reality it is, but at a deeper version of reality, at the version of reality where we embody our true nature, our inherent wholeness, that doesn't exist. And so maybe this is a little bit radical to share, but at least from my own experience, I realized that the feeling of suicide, suicidality, wanting to end my life, was actually coming from a very deep and true part of me that looked out at the world and said, I can't live like this. This is so far from who I am. I can't live like this. And when we end it there, it's incomplete. When we take it a step deeper and we say, wow, this is actually showing me that I'm not meant to live like this. But the buck doesn't stop with ending your life. It continues by saying, how do I actually want to live? What does it mean to be living for me? What makes life meaningful? And I'll get into this in a second. But to just sit with that inquiry and just to open a little bit of space around this thing that can often feel so compressing. I remember feeling always completely overwhelmed and stuck, like I'd been stuck in this box, and that no matter where I turned, I would just always have to come face to face with this feeling of wanting to end my life. And by the grace of God, I found myself in this stuck place so many times that eventually I resigned to it, and the stuckness transformed into stillness. Stillness can be extremely triggering to begin with, right? It can feel very scary. It can feel, as I said, compressing. It can feel like you're stuck. But when you allow it to soften into stillness and you just give yourself 5 minutes of being in it and call it stillness, see what happens in that space. See what happens when you open up a little bit of capacity around what otherwise feels very compressing. And consider the possibility that I do not want to end my life full stop. I want to end my life as it is right now, as it has been. This world that I have come to know of suffering, of pain, of division, of separation, I want that to end. And this is a powerful declaration because it means that you're ready to step into a greater truth of what it actually means to be here. Because we're not meant to live divided. We're not meant to live in suffering. We're not meant to live as these fragmented parts of ourselves that we're just trying to hold together. No, we are here to live as embodied representations of our inherent wholeness. Now, that can sound very abstract when I talk about it that way, and maybe that's space for another video, but all I'm inviting you to do is to open the possibility for more space around that feeling, to take the word suicide out of your vocabulary just for the length of this video and get curious about what it's actually informing you of. Because the fact that you look out at this world of brokenness and suffering and poverty and injustice and pain, and you say, I can't live like that, that's a beautiful thing. We're not meant to live like that. And I get it. Like, of course you want to check out. Of course you want to check out of a world that is broken. But if you look at the brokenness and you disagree, that's because you were here to live a very different life. That's because you were here maybe to change that. Maybe there's something in you that could change that. You don't know. And it's not to put pressure on you that you're here to achieve this great big thing and change the world. It's actually far simpler than that. It's about this internal shift that takes place that then allows you to start seeing beyond that suffering, beyond the division. Because you're seeing from a place of wholeness, from a place of truth, if that makes sense. And this question of what makes life meaningful can also be a little bit of a trap, because life itself is meaningful. I feel that one of the core questions that seekers hold is, what's the meaning of life? What's the purpose of life? Alan Watts put it perfectly. The purpose of life is simply to live it. And that is profound. It's simple, but it's profound. And if that doesn't land for you, I encourage you to sit with it. Right? Because if we cannot feel the inherent purposefulness and joy and miraculousness of existence, of being alive, of having lungs that breathe, of having this incredible technology of a human body, then there are so many other things that I could list off. But these are the simple things that when we truly look at the miracle of them, the question of whether life is meaningful or purposeful goes out of the window. It just already is. And there is a possibility that you can live in this reality where every breath feels like a gift. This is actually one of the most embodied states of ecstasy that you could live in, to have gratitude for every breath. And I feel gifted in many ways with that perspective, because I had spent so much of my time here wishing that I wasn't breathing, right? Wishing that I wasn't alive. And so I suppose I have the benefit of that added perspective, that having spent majority of my life half dead, now the opportunity to feel more alive is perhaps the most valuable thing to me. Nothing else really matters at this point, as much as the feeling of aliveness and maybe more importantly, the feeling of peace that arises from the fact that I'm grateful to be alive. I had actually originally recorded this video and it came out very differently, and there were issues with the audio, and I felt this sense of sadness at the messages that had come through and been lost. But if you are listening to this and you're in that space of contemplating taking your life, and it's probably not the first time you've been there, I'm not saying this to invalidate how you're feeling, because how you're feeling is very real. And it breaks my heart to know that there are so many people who go through this for so long. And I don't say this to invalidate what you're feeling, but I say this to just plant a seed that maybe it doesn't have to end this way. That maybe you don't actually want to die. You just look at the world and realize this isn't how we're meant to live. Like, if we turn it on its head, it's not that you want to die, it's that you want so desperately to live the beauty of this life, that there's a part of you The part of you that says, I can't live like this, is actually saying, I need to live like this, the opposite of this. And all I'm asking is that you give yourself 5 minutes. I'm not taking that exit route away from you. I got to a point on my journey with suicide where I realized I needed to know that that back door was there. Like it just gave me this sense of like, okay, if it gets too much, I can always just take that. I can always just exit stage left. I'm not taking that away from you. I can't control what you decide to do with this information. I pray that it plants a seed that might get you through that dark period of feeling stuck, and maybe consider that what you're in right now isn't this cage, isn't this dead end, but it's soil, and it's a fertile space for you to plant the seeds that you choose to plant. So get curious with that part of you that you have perceived to be saying, I want to end my life, and consider that it might have more to say. It might have more to inform you about how you are actually here to live. And do not underestimate having that dialogue. Do not underestimate what can happen when you shift your perspective on truly how miraculous it is to live. I know that might not land right now when you're in that space where everything is just, you're at the end of it. I get it, and I hear you. And I'm praying that some of my words can land. It's so edgy for me to speak in this space because I know what's on the line. But if you can just give yourself 5 minutes to get curious about what that part could be saying, the wisdom that that part of you could be guiding you towards. Maybe that could just be a moment, a turning point, a little flicker of light in the darkness, and that's all we need. And sometimes when things are the very darkest, that's when we can see the light for what it really is. And it just takes a flick of the switch. It just takes one spark. I really pray that some of these words have landed for you. It's okay not to be okay. Please reach out. Allow yourself to feel what you're feeling, but you don't have to take the next step. Just give yourself a little bit of space. Give yourself what you need. And reach out to people. There are people who love you. Pray. Pray to God. I really pray that peace is with you. And I think this is a huge, huge aspect for me, is I had spent so long trying to fix myself and trying to be happy and trying to do all these things that I thought would make me feel better about life. But the more I reached, the more I felt like I was sinking in quicksand. And the higher I tried to reach, the deeper I seemed to sink. And I got to a point where I just couldn't anymore. I couldn't strive after these things. And in this place of feeling so dark and stuck is where peace revealed itself to me. And we can often have all these lofty ideas of what peace is and that we can earn it and this, that, and the other. We can't. It just is. It's there all the time. And the beautiful thing about finding peace in rock bottom is that if you can find it there, you can find it anywhere. Right? So give yourself 5 minutes. 5 minutes of being still and quiet. And invite peace to arise. Invite grace into your life. Invite divine revelation. Invite curiosity. Because your life is worth living. And I have evidence of that by the fact of you being alive. It's no mistake. You're not an accident. You're not insignificant. You're not just a blip in this infinite timeline, even though some circles will convince you that you are. You're kind of both, right? It's a paradox. Yes, we just exist like a little speck of dust in the fabric of reality, and at the same time, you will never be repeated again. You are a unique masterpiece that will never ever happen again. There is something in that. And sometimes I remind myself just by looking at my fingerprint, right, that of all the billions and billions of human beings that have come and gone, the fingerprint is unique to every single person. If you need evidence of the fact that you are meant to be here, it's right there in your hand. Thank you so much for staying for this video. If you feel that anybody else needs to hear this, please share it with them. I'm sending you so much love. I pray that peace is with you, and God bless.